5 minutes to go, and Damon Hill is on the dirty side of the track. He's on the right-hand side of the track as he goes into the imaginatively named first corner, which is the right-hander, which leads down towards the Atwood curve, which is one of the third gear corners on this track. And so Damon has got a distinct disadvantage in comparison with David Coulthard, who is on the left, the cleaner side of the track, and notably Michael Schumacher, who starts behind David Coulthard in third position on the grid. There's the confirmation, all Williams front row for the start of the 83 lap race. Schumacher and Alesi, the Benetton and the Ferrari, then the second Ferrari of Berger with Eddie Irvine, an excellent sixth, the man who's going to be driving for Ferrari next year. Johnny Herbert looking for points, seventh, alongside Fredson, gone extremely well in the Sauber and was quick in the warm-up this morning. Olivier Panis in the Ligier, and there is Magnussen starting 12th for his first Grand Prix. Those are the quicker men, because those are the top 7 rows. Now we come down towards Bouillon in the second Sauber Ford, and the two Tyrrells who are starting together from the 9th row of the grid. Gianni Morbidelli is replacing Max Papis. He's come back into Grand Prix racing, the Italian. And at the rear of the grid, you see Andrea Montemini in the Pacific and his teammate returning to Grand Prix racing, the Belgian Bertrand Gachot. Now, the configuration of this circuit is that they come down a 175 mile an hour straight into the first corner, then into a sweeping left-hander, dropping downhill. There is a bit of gradient, and as you see, 27 points between Hill and Schumacher, only 12 points between Hill and Coulthard, and for that matter, the fourth equal of Johnny Herbert and Jean Alesi is only 3 points behind David Coulthard in the Drivers' Championship. Benetton lead Williams by 20 points, so all sorts of things could happen here at Aida today. And a quick word from Tony Jardine in the pit lane.
I'm still actually alongside Michael Schumacher's car on the grid. Now, he had a problem when he came on the grid. It was definitely an engine-related problem. Ross Brawn called all the technicians around, including the Renault men, and they've been fiddling with the computer at the side of his car up until 5 minutes ago. All seems calm now, but watch out, there could be some problems with Schumacher's engine, which would be to Hill's advantage. And listening to talk of tyres, we can confirm that Michael Schumacher has 3 fresh sets of tyres left. Damon Hill and David Coulthard have 2 fresh sets, whereas Jean Alesi only has 1 fresh set left, and Jonathan would like to comment on that.
Yes, the important thing there is that they do have as many as Tony was saying, fresh sets. That means absolutely brand new sets. That is an advantage over running a tyre that's even done just 3 laps. So Schumacher being the canniest so far, Williams being pretty good, whilst Ferrari are once more going to have a bit of a struggle.
And this morning, Michael Schumacher went off the track and damaged his race car, tore off the barge board, part of the aerodynamics on the left-hand side of the car. The handling of the Benetton all this meeting, and particularly this morning, has been incredibly nervous. That's the way Michael Schumacher likes it, but 83 laps here at Aida is not something that I would be looking forward to if I was in his position. But he's determined to get the last ounce of performance out of that car. It's been repaired. He decided that he would go out in the repaired race car rather than in the spare car. And when this parade lap starts, as it will be doing very shortly, David Coulthard is going to be very, very careful. Remember, he's already in the last few races been off twice before the race even started, starting in the Italian Grand Prix in Italy at Monza. So he's going to be leading them round, the 24 competitors, on that parade lap very, very carefully indeed. It's his responsibility to take them round, to make sure that the speed is appropriate, so that when he comes up to his position on the starting grid.
You've lost it. On the right-hand side of the track, if we look at it, that's the left-hand side down the straight. Now that's the line that the cars take when they're lapping, and so it's a cleaner track.
through the right-hander there, named the first corner, and then through the next left. Now this is named Williams Corner. We have some interesting names on this circuit, which have really been derived from Grand Prix drivers of a bygone age. And then we come into the Atwood hairpin. Now this is a 70 miles an hour third gear corner leading on to what is really about the only overtaking opportunity, and that's difficult. Onto the main straight, up through the gears, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, to about 175 miles an hour as they come into what's simply called the hairpin. Once again, the drivers getting heat. Look, we can see those labels on Schumacher's car. That's the third car back. You see the flashes of white going round and round. That's going to give Schumacher, as well as Hill, as well as Coulthard, an advantage, because in the early laps, that's probably worth half a second or so. This corner, the left-hander, is called Revolver. It's actually quite an apt name, because we've seen more spins there than perhaps anywhere else. Through the left-hander of Piper, more labels on David Coulthard's car as he slows up, allowing the field to bunch up behind. It's quite warm here at Aida, and he doesn't want to end up on that grid well ahead. Then through the Redmond corner, second gear, hairpin, and right down to 50 miles an hour. Now, as they come out of Redmond up to Hobbs, they can't even get on full throttle on that short straight. With the 700 horsepower, it's just too much. Out of the 50 miles an hour Hobbs hairpin, through the Mike Knight right, through the last corner as they come onto the grid, and you're going to see the cars all keep to the left before they sweep to the right to take their grid places finally. But from the start, don't forget Damon Hill, or rather Michael Schumacher, took the lead from Damon Hill's position last year. And it's my guess, though, this time we may see Michael Schumacher get ahead of Hill off the line, as he has done for the last two Grand Prix. I think we should look out for Eddie Irvine, too, back in sixth place. He could well get by Gerhard Berger. Now, there's a prediction for you.
So they roll up to their positions on the starting grid. Remember, on the right-hand side of the grid, as you look at it, is David Coulthard. On the clean side of the track, that is Michael Schumacher. We're on his car now, looking ahead at Coulthard's car. Damon Hill on the left of your picture is on the dirty side of the track, and right behind him is the Scarlet Ferrari of Jean Alesi. There is the reigning world champion. Is he going to be the 1995 world champion? In a couple of hours' time, this race is going to last about 1 hour and 45 minutes, all being well, for 83 laps of this track. And I say again, because it bears repetition, that this first corner is going to be one of the most important of the season for these three men at the front. Coulthard in pole position, Damon Hill on the left, Michael Schumacher behind Coulthard. And remember, it's the right-hand side of the track which is the clean side. And Coulthard leads. Damon Hill slots into second place. Michael Schumacher looks as though he's trying to drive round the outside of him, but does not succeed. But the Ferrari of Jean Alesi comes through from fourth on the grid to second, ahead of Damon Hill. And that is significant. Now, here is David Coulthard leading. So, Alesi is in second place. Damon Hill is third. Schumacher has dropped back to fifth position behind Gerhard Berger. Both the Ferraris, who had a handling problem in the warm-up this morning, have got away superbly. Coulthard trying to break away. Alesi holding up Damon Hill. Gerhard Berger is fourth. Michael Schumacher is fifth. Sixth is Johnny Herbert as they go round the hairpin into Revolver, the left-hander. Now Piper. You can see that this surface is very tricky indeed as the cars shake their heads. Coulthard, Alesi, Hill, Berger, Schumacher ahead of his teammate Johnny Herbert. Not a good start for Michael Schumacher, and I remind you how nervous that car is in handling terms, and I remind you that he needs to finish up front as much as he can in order to win the World Championship this year. He's not in good shape at the moment as they come through to complete the lap. Coulthard and Hill is challenging Alesi as they go into first corner. Gerhard Berger has got a car's length ahead of Michael Schumacher. Eddie Irvine is in seventh place and Frentzen is eighth.
Round Williams corner, now down through the Moss S's at about 160 miles an hour into Atwood curve.
Well, that was a great start there from David Coulthard. He really made the best of being on the right bit of track. But Damon Hill did a very good job too, proving that there's not too much wrong with that side as he has a look at Jean Alesi. And Alesi, of course, also being on the right-hand side. Now, what happened at the start, we may get a replay of it, was that when Schumacher tried to brave it out round the outside of that first corner, Hill driving really quite robustly, and let's have another look. We now get a good view. So Coulthard moves away from pole position, moves across. Hill is virtually alongside, and he is indeed alongside Schumacher. Watch how Schumacher tries to go around the outside of him. Hill's having none of it. Hill pushes Schumacher wide, deliberately, I think, because there's been a meeting and it's been agreed that providing driving is not dangerous, then it will be allowed in the sort of action that we saw at Nürburgring. And I think that thought was right in Damon Hill's mind when he squeezed Schumacher to the outside, and that really did work very well for Hill, because Schumacher, of course, is back in 5th place and significantly behind a Ferrari. And now we're going to have to see what Hill can do about Alesi, because I suspect that Hill was working on certainly getting away ahead of Schumacher, definitely getting away ahead of Alesi. So he'll be on light tanks, they're both on fresh tyres, or certainly Hill is. So Hill at the moment is being held up behind Alesi, and he's not able to use the benefit of that lighter car, but it's all going Coulthard's way. He's really able to pull out.
Lap 3, Coulthard is leading Alesi by over 4 seconds. Martin Brundle.
Yes, I think Michael Schumacher's confidence for once got ahead of him there, and that was not a great manoeuvre around the outside of that corner. There's so much dust around, as you can see off the line, and I think he had very little chance of getting round there. Quite why Damon had to slow down so much. Maybe their wheels were slightly interlocked, but Damon stood his ground, and Michael's now virtually wasted his first set of new tyres. He's going to follow that Ferrari for a long time.
And he's on lap 3 at the present moment, with David Coulthard leading Jean Alesi by over 4 seconds, with Damon Hill tucked up under his wing in 3rd position. You can see them down there. Those two you're looking at are on the right, Gerhard Berger, and behind him Michael Schumacher, who's only just in the points. Out of the race goes Bertrand Gachot in the Pacific. He's only lasted for 3 laps, having been out of Grand Prix racing for 3 months. The last race he drove in was the British Grand Prix. He was making heavy weather of it in qualifying. He's very rusty in his own words. And Alesi and Hill battling for 2nd position, with the Frenchman in the Ferrari ahead. Continue round the track, and off it altogether goes Bertrand Gachot. We're into lap 4 in this 83-lap race. Coulthard is now over 5 seconds ahead of this battle, and Alesi looks to me as though he's certainly holding up Damon Hill. 4th is Berger, 5th is Schumacher, 6th is Johnny Herbert, 7th is Irvine, 8th is Frentzen, 9th is Blundell, and in 10th position, superb, Jan Magnussen in his first Grand Prix for McLaren.
Yes, indeed, Magnussen taking over from Mika Hakkinen, who's recovering from appendicitis. But there is absolutely no doubt that Damon Hill, we're looking at him following Jean Alesi's Ferrari, is being held up to the tune of at least 1.5 seconds by that Ferrari of Alesi. And similarly, Schumacher is being held up by Berger. We're now on lap 3, and the chances are that there's really going to be nothing that either of those two drivers can do about getting by the respective Ferrari ahead of them, unless the Ferrari makes a mistake. And that's what Hill's going to have to do. He's going to have to try and push, make advantage of what I believe will be certainly at least the same fuel load, if not better. He should have better tyres on. That should give him an advantage in these earlier stages. Hill really needs to push very hard now to try and force Alesi into making a mistake. And by that I mean perhaps having a big slide, getting sideways, late on the power, to give Hill just a token of a chance to get up alongside. Someone like here would be a good example, but you can see he's just too far behind. Is he going to have a look at the inside into the hairpin? But it looks, yes, and indeed that's Schumacher who's gone by Berger. We're looking from the inside, and he has done it. That's exactly the kind of manoeuvre that it's going to take. Schumacher's managed to do it to Berger. Hill has not done it to Alesi.
Damon Hill has had a lot of criticism for not being forceful enough. Well, it's a very different point of view from inside the cockpit, but now he's got Michael Schumacher behind him in 4th position. It'll be interesting to see whether the German, the world champion, can close up on Damon Hill. The gap was just under 2 seconds between Hill in 3rd position and Berger, who was 4th. Now it's Schumacher. We're into lap 6. And coming towards us, you see Jean Alesi, then Damon Hill. There is Michael Schumacher, 4th, Gerhard Berger 5th. Johnny Herbert is holding on very well in 6th position. He's 13 seconds behind the race leader, and Damon Hill has another look, another try as they come down. This is a replay of Michael Schumacher going through and taking that 4th position from Jean Alesi.
And that really was a perfect manoeuvre there, the perfect overtaking manoeuvre from Michael Schumacher. He would have come out of that previous Atwood hairpin close to Berger's tail, come up in the slipstream through the gears, would have had about a 5 miles an hour speed advantage. The cars on their own are very similar, but by Schumacher getting in the tow, he slipstreamed alongside. Good fair driving from Berger. He let Schumacher come up the inside. He didn't try and block him. Schumacher goes by. Now Schumacher already closing up on Damon Hill. Of course, Damon Hill, we mustn't forget, is being held up by Alesi. So the real challenge is going to be difficult for Hill now, because he's going to want to try and get by Alesi, but now he's got Schumacher breathing all down his neck, and that's a very uncomfortable position for any driver to be in.
Meantime, David Coulthard is metaphorically laughing all the way to the checkered flag. He is over 8 seconds now ahead of the battle between Alesi and Hill for 2nd place.
Yes, David's taking well over a second a lap out of everybody, nearer a second and a half, and Schumacher's picked up his pace now. He's got past Berger. I suspect Alesi may be on a lighter fuel load. He looks like he could be more of a handful to pass than Berger was. Berger may be on a 2-stopper.
David Coulthard is the fastest man on the track so far. His fastest lap, 1 minute 16.6. Michael Schumacher is the 2nd fastest. He's just gone round in over 1 minute 17 seconds. Alesi and Hill are both lapping in about 1 minute 18. So as you can see for yourselves, looking at the picture, Alesi and Hill, 2nd and 3rd, are being caught by that man, Michael Schumacher, as he rounds the hairpin, drops down to the left-hander at Revolver, where with Schumacher now looking at Damon Hill's car ahead, the Williams Renault, and that's the target. Damon's last lap was 1:18.3, Schumacher's last lap was 1:17.3, and it's Alesi that's the problem. We're on board with Damon Hill now, looking at Alesi, who is holding up Hill, and as a result of that, Schumacher is catching the Williams Renault. It's a 3-car battle on lap 8 out of 83, just about 1/10 distance already between the Ferrari, the Williams and the Benetton. There they are in the background. You see Gerhard Berger, who is being caught, has been caught by Johnny Herbert, who is in 6th place. Eddie Irvine is 4 seconds behind Herbert, 7th. Frentzen 8th, Blundell 9th. Magnussen is still in the top 10 in his first Grand Prix, ahead of Rubens Barrichello 11th and Olivier Panis in 12th position. Great scrap.
Well, Alesi's brought up his pace a bit. 16.7 the last lap for Coulthard, 17.9 for Alesi. He was in the 18s before that, but Schumacher has clearly closed. He's right on Damon Hill's tail, and this really is a very difficult position for Hill, because in his efforts to try and force Alesi into a mistake, he may at some point have to lift off himself, and it's that kind of opportunity that Schumacher is going to be striving to try and capitalise on. He really wants to see Damon Hill have a go at Alesi, because in the ensuing scramble there's quite a good chance that Schumacher can slip by. That of course is something which Hill too is going to be very well aware of.
And Damon Hill at the Nürburgring 3 weeks ago had a coming together with Jean Alesi, who trod on the Williams front wing and knocked it off. And he also had a coming together with Michael Schumacher, who is behind him. So there's a lot at stake here. And off goes the Sauber, and out goes Jean-Christophe Bouillon, the French driver, who's also the reserve driver for Williams. He was in 15th position. He's out of the race. That makes the 2nd retirement to join Bertrand Gachot.
And that's not going to go down well at all with the Sauber team, because Bouillon also spun off on his very first time lap on qualifying yesterday. So his fortunes with the Sauber team, I think, are going to be limited to just this season. Really, he has not shown the kind of form that we might have expected after his Williams testing role, that he's also pretty much petered out this year.
Now, this is a 4-sprint race, really. We think for David Coulthard, if he stops 3 times as we expect him to. He's making good use of his light fuel load and his fresh tyres, and the fact that Alesi there and Hill and Berger are battling for 3rd position, because Coulthard now on lap 9 is nearly 12 seconds ahead. He's more than a second a lap ahead of the 3 men behind him. With Gerhard Berger dropping back, he's 3.5 seconds behind this battle in 5th position.
Now, of course, one of the question marks here is the fuel strategy. Are these three, or indeed the field, the front runners, going to be stopping 3 times or twice? Those are the options. I think from looking at this pace that we've seen from David Coulthard, he's going to be stopping 3 times. But I think probably Alesi is too, because throughout the qualifying we've seen the Ferraris be pretty much a second off the Williams cars, and that's what we're witnessing now, with Alesi being, well, maybe a little bit more than that, 12 seconds away from Coulthard after lap 9. But I'd still go for Alesi stopping 3 times. Now, I think what Damon Hill's going to have to hope is that when he stops, and I suspect that'll be within a lap or two of Coulthard in another 10 lap or so's time, that Schumacher won't be able to get by at the stop. And in return, Benetton will be determined to make sure that their stop for Schumacher will be one that enables Schumacher to get by Hill. Now, normally the Benetton stops are a little bit shorter than those of Williams, and I suspect that Benetton will probably put on a bit less fuel when they do stop, maybe by virtue of Schumacher having more fuel in now, to enable Schumacher to get ahead of Hill. We may well see Schumacher not really try particularly hard, certainly not take any risks at this point to get by Hill, but rely on a cleverer, more tactical strategy so it can happen in the pits.
Michael Schumacher at the moment, being in 4th position, is on 3 World Championship points. If he just stayed there, from his point of view, he wouldn't be unhappy, because he would be the world champion of 1995. Knowing Michael Schumacher and remembering how he drove in the Grand Prix of Europe at the Nürburgring 3 weeks ago, I would expect him to be making a challenge. Indeed, he's closer to Damon Hill now, who's further back from Jean Alesi, and Gerhard Berger has a look as they go round the Atwood curve. Martin.
It's strange how you can catch a group of cars up so quickly. It's a psychological thing. And then if you don't pass them very, very quickly, you tend to just fall into their pace. Of course, your car is affected badly.
So, you see for yourselves there, sorry Martin, you see for yourselves there that Schumacher is certainly not hanging back. He's going for that place ahead of Damon Hill, knowing that it will increase the World Championship gap between himself and the Williams Renault driver. There's colossal pressure on both of them, and particularly on Schumacher, because this is the 4th race in which his suspended 1 race ban, suspended for 4 races, applies. Here's the replay. Watch Schumacher on the right.
So Schumacher gets the run on Hill coming into the hairpin. Hill takes the inside line. Schumacher looks at the outside, locks up that right front wheel, but Hill manages to keep it tight, and that was the important thing to do round that hairpin to prevent Schumacher coming up on the inside. Now, once Hill got in front, coming 2/3 of the way through that corner, there was then nothing that Schumacher can now do until we get to that point on the next lap, and I suspect we shall see Michael close his way up through he's just coming down to the Atwood hairpin now, where the whole thing started before. So clearly, and that's one of the Ligiers, that is indeed a Suzuki, Aguri Suzuki, out of the race, wheel spinning. I'm afraid that's a scene that we've seen all too often from Suzuki. He's actually retired from many races in the past for going off the road. That's at the last corner, and you can see it on the map there, end of his race. Embarrassing on home soil.
Yes, and not in a very good place, because a lot of cars were putting wheels onto the gravel there yesterday. They take a very wide line coming out of that corner, and I hope they're going to be able to drag the car through the gravel at least part of the way. But meantime, with Schumacher again having a look to get past Damon Hill, Coulthard is now on his 12th lap, and he's 14 seconds ahead of Alesi, who is 2.3 seconds ahead of the battle you've just been looking at. And the marshals connect up the crane hook to remove the... No, they're going to tow it off. I apologise, they're going to tow it off. But remember, we're on lap 13 now, and it could be as early as we think, lap 18, that David Coulthard could be coming in if he's on a 3-stop strategy. And that's why he's endeavouring to build the maximum gap between himself and second place Jean Alesi, so that he can get into the pits, stop, change 4 wheels and tyres, take on a small amount of fuel, bearing in mind he would be coming in twice more, and get back into the race as quickly as possible without being caught up with traffic. Lap 13 then. That's Alesi. There's Hill, behind him Schumacher.
Yes, Michael Schumacher obviously has got a sense of humour with that manoeuvre he tried to make around the outside of Damon. That would have been extremely embarrassing if he'd have pulled that one off. It never really was an opportunity, but it was fun to see him try. But these two, I think, will now catch Alesi back up again. As I was saying before that manoeuvre, it's a psychological thing. You can speed up to the back of another car, and on a tight circuit like this, you can almost get mesmerised and just end up falling into that car's pace. And it's you have to push yourself very hard to arrive and try and overtake that car immediately. Otherwise, you just settle into his pace.
And David Coulthard has already, on lap 14 out of 83, lapped everybody up to 19th place because he's just gone past Roberto Moreno's 40 Ford. The Brazilian, very experienced driver, has now been lapped. And of course that's going to make things even more difficult for Alesi, Hill and Schumacher. They're going to get in amongst the traffic, but David Coulthard is dealing with very capably thus far. Retirement so far: Bertrand Gachot is out, Bouillon is out, Suzuki is out. 21 competitors left. We're on lap 14. That's the race leader.
So lap 13, Coulthard 13 seconds ahead of Alesi. Now at this point I suspect that the Williams team believe that Alesi is going to stop 3 times, certainly the same number of times as Coulthard, but they can't be absolutely sure, and it would be much more comfortable for Williams and Coulthard if he can continue to pull out a second and a half a lap, because if Coulthard makes his first stop round about lap 20, he might just have a sufficient advantage, a sufficient gap. Let's say 24 seconds will probably be enough for him to come in for that pit stop, take on 55 odd litres of fuel and get out ahead of the man we're now riding with, ahead of John Alesi. And that means that if Alesi was after all going to make 2 stops and therefore stay out for a further 6 or 7 laps, Coulthard is not going to get held up behind Alesi, and that after all is what happened to Damon Hill, to Hill's frustration at the last Grand Prix. Hill came out of the pits, and or rather Hill came up behind Alesi and was being held up behind Alesi, and he'd had to lose 2, perhaps 4 seconds from doing that.
Well, now Alesi's got the traffic problem that David Coulthard has dealt with. He's got the 240s in front of him. First of all, that of Pedro Diniz. That's the yellow car with the green stripe on the front wing. Past goes Alesi. Damon Hill nips through. Pedro Diniz runs wide, and Michael Schumacher goes through. That was a thoughtful and considerate bit of driving by the Brazilian, who's very new to Formula One. And Alesi, Hill, Schumacher, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. Berger is still 5th. He's 6 seconds behind this battle. Johnny Herbert is in 6th place, just about 1.5 seconds behind Berger. Eddie Irvine has dropped from 6th on the grid to 7th in the race. Heinz-Harald Frentzen is 8th in the race as he was on the grid. And still the 2 McLaren Mercedes of Blundell and Magnussen are in 9th and 10th places. This is the completion of the lap, and through to the Moss S go the Ferrari, the Williams Renault, the Benetton Renault. It's still anybody's 2nd place.
Yes, and as they approach another 40, I know from when I'm in the races, you're lapping those yellow cars. I think they're called 40s because there appear to be about 40 of them. You keep coming across them every lap, but they do seem to be getting out of the way a bit better these days.
There was a 6-second gap between David Coulthard in pole position and the fastest of the 2 40 cars, and considering they're lapping in about 1 minute 20, it'll give you an indication of how many times they're going to be lapped during the race. About 7, I would suspect, at least.
Well, it could be an advantage for Damon Hill or Michael Schumacher as we're looking at Jean Alesi coming up to lap the 40 car. This is a possible opportunity for Alesi to stumble and then Hill or Schumacher to get by. But I think at this time I would expect to see, and Rubens Barrichello there goes by. I think that's Magnussen, who actually comes back up the inside once again. Tremendous driving there. That really is the stuff that real future stars are made of. Barrichello being a very well respected driver, Magnussen on his first race, but really doing well. This is thoroughly impressive stuff from this young 22-year-old.
And behind them is Olivier Panis. This is the battle for 10th position. The red and white McLaren Mercedes of Grand Prix debut man Jan Magnussen from Denmark, keeping Rubens Barrichello, to another 22-year-old but a lot more experience in Grand Prix racing, because this is Barrichello's 45th Grand Prix, And behind him is the blue Ligier of Olivier Parnis, and here is the battle for second place, which has got the 40 behind them. Lacey, Hill, Schumacher. Coulthard is on his 17th lap, so are these three. We can expect the first fuel and tyre stops any time now, if our guess, and it is a guess, about 3 stop strategies for the leaders is correct, and that's where the race could change, with David Coulthard some 12 seconds in the lead.
Yes, indeed. I'd expect to see Coulthard or Hill come in within the next 2 laps, and indeed Lacey as well. And what's interesting is that Coulthard has actually lost a little bit of ground to Jean Lacey in the last 5 laps. At lap 10, Coulthard was 12.2 seconds ahead of Lacey. On lap 17 now, Coulthard is only 11.9 seconds ahead now, which in fact just moved up to 12.5. We know traffic's played a part, but nevertheless, I'm sure that Coulthard is really feeling the effect of those tyres going off. He started on new tyres. Probably Lacey didn't, and so the benefit that Coulthard felt in the very, very early stages has now worn off, and hence greater parity between their times.
These three are coming up on Taki Inoue, or is it Gianni Morbidelli? Gianni Morbidelli in the Arrows, returning to Grand Prix racing. He's in 17th position. You can see his car ahead of Lacey and Hill and Schumacher. Are we going to be confounded about 3 stop strategies, because we see no sign of either the Williams or the Benetton mechanics coming out of the garages with all their equipment? Yes, there. Yeah, as I say that, the Williams people come out, the Ferrari people are ready, so we are going to be seeing tyre stops. And meantime, is Morbidelli going to affect the battle for second position? Hill, Schumacher and Berger. There's Lacey, Hill and Schumacher.
Now, let's watch these stops carefully. We know we're expecting a Williams stop and a Ferrari stop, and there's big traffic jams up there. But when we watch these cars, when we watch them at the stop, we need to look to see how long that fuel pipe on. That's the critical bit, and this is critical too, as Damon Hill has a look up the inside of Jean Lacey. Is he going to do it? Oh, Lacey closes the door firmly. Good job. This is very reminiscent of just before the fuel stops at the last Grand Prix, when Damon did indeed go for the gap and ended up being squeezed onto the grass on the inside. But this time it's clearly only a lap or 2 before they come in. But when they come in for this pit stop, we need to watch A, how long the pit stop is, but B, how long that fuel line is on. We know that the fuel goes in at the rate of roughly 10 litres of a second. If it's going to be a 3-stop strategy, that's going to be about 55 litres of fuel they need, and a Benetton stop too. Now, I suspect that might be for Herbert rather than Schumacher. I might be wrong, but for Schumacher to be able to get by Damon Hill, he needs to do it on the fuel stops. That means being stationary for a shorter amount of time. So for a 3-stopper, let's just recap. 55 litres, 5.5 seconds with the fuel, add 3 seconds to get the hose on and off. That's about an 8.5 second stop if it's 3 stops. If it's a 10-second stop, it's going to be the first of 2, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be round about 8.
Martin, your thoughts?
I'm absolutely amazed somebody didn't duck into the pits last lap, because they would have had track position. Now they're all going in together.
Yeah, and we're riding with Damon Hill, who's got a Lacey in front of him and Schumacher behind him. 2nd, 3rd and 4th all in together, while David Coulthard stays out. Now there is a Lacey. Hill goes into the pit lane in front of him and Schumacher between them.
Let's see if this fuel into Schumacher. We're looking at Hill, but let's see if Schumacher can just put that pipe on shorter and get out quicker.
Well, Lacey sprints out and Schumacher is ahead. So Schumacher has got ahead of and is nearly collected by Eddie Irvine, and Damon Hill was last out.
And brilliant tactics there from the Benetton team. They knew that their chance to get Michael Schumacher ahead of Damon Hill and Jean Lacey was going to come from being in that pit for the minimum amount of time. Now we didn't see the fuel pipe going on, and it's my guess that they simply changed tyres as quickly as they could. You can see new labels on once again, and kept the fuel pipe on for as long as they could, as long as it took to change those tyres, and not a second longer. That was the defining thing, and that tactic has got Schumacher ahead of Hill and ahead of Lacey, and I think this could well be instrumental in the race, and it's certainly given Hill a problem, because that was a long stop from Williams, and Hill is now once again stuck behind Lacey.
Yeah, and Hill has not only got Schumacher ahead of him, he's got Irvine and Frentzen, so he's in real trouble. But news from Tony Jardine.
Must say down here it was absolutely brilliant because I had a grandstand seat as the Ferrari, the Benetton and the Williams all came in together. The Benetton guys were absolutely fantastic, very, very efficient indeed, but unfortunately on the left rear of Damon Hill's car there was a problem and the mechanics went in dejectedly, shaking their heads, which cost Damon that last place, last of the three, going out of the pits.
Well, now, as you look at Damon Hill, who has slipped down the order, and we watch the McLaren of, it's Mark Blundell. He's come in, and on lap 21, David Coulthard is now 27 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger, neither of whom have been in, of course. Johnny Herbert up into third place. There is Michael Schumacher, who is fourth, and a long, long way ahead of Hill, who's down into eighth position, with Irvine fifth, Frentzen sixth, and Alesi in seventh place. So both Schumacher and Alesi are ahead of Damon Hill. There is the German world champion in fourth position, having made his stop. He's the leading driver in the race on lap 22 who has made a stop, because Coulthard leading by 27 seconds. Berger in second place is coming into the pits now as I talk to you, and Johnny Herbert is in third position, probably going through to second place if he doesn't come in. And we ride now with Damon Hill through to complete the lap, and he's got Heinz-Harald Frentzen in front of him. And in front of Frentzen is Alesi. In front of Alesi is Irvine. Look at the traffic that Damon's got to cope with. And of course that Schumacher is ahead of. Coulthard leads now. Schumacher is up into second place, 37 seconds behind Coulthard, who therefore has got time to stop, change his wheels and tyres, refuel and get back onto the track, still in the lead, but in the lead in front of the world champion. Lap 22, Coulthard, Schumacher, Irvine, Alesi, Frentzen and Hill are the top six.
Well, things have all gone horribly wrong for Damon Hill, and there you can see it. Hill following Alesi, but also two other cars in front of him there. This really is tremendously frustrating. But what great tactics once again from the Benetton team. Now, one of the bits of information that we have is how long the cars are in the pit lane for. That's from the time they enter the pit lane, including their stop, till the time they come out of the pit lane. Now let me just tell you that in that first round of stops, Hill was in the pit lane for 29.3 seconds, Schumacher 23.2. He picked up 6 seconds on Damon Hill, and Jean Alesi in the middle on 26 in what was a normal stop. For the one of Hill's, we know they lost 3 seconds because of that wheel problem. But great work, and that also means that we are now sure it's a 3-stop strategy, certainly for Hill, Schumacher, and Alesi and Berger and Blundell, because all of those have come in. And Magnussen too, I've just seen.
You're looking at Damon Hill frantically trying to get past fifth placed Heinz-Harald Frentzen, and this is Jan Magnussen in the pits from 11th place. His first Grand Prix pit stop. He was practicing them at Silverstone before he came here, knowing of course that he would have to make his first Grand Prix start and his first Grand Prix pit stops. But there are Irvine third, Alesi fourth, Hill going up into fifth place. Is he ahead of Heinz-Harald Frentzen? Yes, he is. So that's one of them disposed of. But the gap between Damon Hill, who is now in fifth position, and Michael Schumacher, who is in second place, is about 11 seconds. And that is a massive deficit.
Now the real question at the moment is David Coulthard on just a 2-stop strategy? He has not pitted. It's now lap 23. This is looking suspiciously like he's on a 2-stop strategy. That would mean his first stop round about lap 27, and that means that his performance so far is even more impressive. It's the kind of performance that we used to wax lyrical about from Schumacher early on, as Schumacher sets a new fastest lap of 1 minute 16.6. That's as we expect, because he's got fresh tyres on there. He's now 33.7 seconds behind Coulthard. Now this should give Coulthard enough of a margin for him to come in, and it must surely be, if he's on a 2-stopper, for his first stop in another 4 laps time to actually get into the pits and get out ahead of Michael Schumacher.
Irvine laps Inouye. Alesi laps Inouye. Right behind him, Damon Hill does the same thing. But of course, if David Coulthard is on a two-stop strategy, it means that his tyres are going to be worn at the end of the race. And what a terrific scrap as Alesi goes past Eddie Irvine up into third position. And there, Damon Hill drops back.
Well, Damon Hill there giving Eddie Irvine a tap on the front. I think Hill just didn't appreciate that Irvine was going to slow up at that point. It probably hasn't done any damage to the cars, I don't think, as Katayama comes in for his first stop, lap 24 for him. And Williams pit are getting ready for Coulthard, we hear now. So I think Williams have been hedging their bets. Now, the interesting thing now is, will they try and convert Coulthard, into a two-stop strategy, or will they have it as a three-stopper? And the way we're going to tell is from how long he's stationary. There shouldn't be any other cars around. Let's have another look there as up the inside there goes Alesi inside Irvine. Hill's left front wheel right on the back of Irvine. That was really very difficult indeed. Let's have another look from the outside. Irvine locks up his wheels. Hill comes in the inside, pushes. That was a mistake from Damon Hill really there. He was really never going to have a chance to get through there. Now look at the time. We need to see the time. Coulthard's coming in. If it's going to be 8-9 seconds, it's a three-stopper. If it's going to be 10 or 11, it could be a two-stopper.
32 seconds in the lead ahead of Michael Schumacher. This is lap 25. What Williams need to do here is just be very careful and deliberate about changing those tyres, changing those wheels, letting the fuel go in, getting the fuel hose off. It's a long stop. 11 seconds. Jonathan.
Two-stopper, the first of two stops. That's my guess. And where is he coming out? This is the important issue. And Coulthard is out ahead of Michael Schumacher. David Coulthard still leads the Grand Prix. That's perfect.
By 7.5 seconds on new tyres. That's good news for David Coulthard. Bad news for Michael Schumacher. But not too much of a problem for Michael Schumacher. He's currently on 6 points for second place in the race if he stays where he is at worst from his point of view. And that would increase his World Championship lead over Damon Hill, who's currently in fourth position. Martin.
Yes, I think Damon has broken the end fence on his front wing. You can see them getting another one ready there. It won't affect the performance too much, and it certainly wouldn't be worth stopping for, I imagine, but it's going to make him understeer. It's going to make the front of the car slide more than it should. I just hope there's not more structural damage than that.
Well, Damon certainly gets his share of bad luck in terms of collisions and problems in Grand Prix. Remember what happened to him in Germany when he hit Alesi and had a coming together with Michael Schumacher, which adversely affected his performance. And if he has to change a nose cone, it's certainly going to be the end of his World Championship hopes. And maybe it's going to make things difficult for him in terms of second place in the World Championship, because Coulthard was only 12 points behind him in third place when this race started.
There you can see it clearly, the end plate broken off of that front wing. Now I'm afraid that was not bad luck from Damon Hill. That was an error, a judgmental error. I'm afraid we've seen it all too often from Damon Hill. He can be so very quick, but he can also make some silly mistakes, and that was one. Eddie Irvine is known as being a tough nut, and now with the edge of that front wing broken, that he will lose the balance of his car to the extent that the front will tend to slide wide. Now on a circuit in which tyre performance is so important, you really cannot afford to have them going off, and that's going to compound his problem and really put him out of the equation as that Irvine comes in for his first stop.
Lap 27. Coulthard leads Schumacher by a decreased margin of 5.6 seconds. Coulthard on new tyres and a heavier fuel load than Schumacher. Alesi is third, Hill is fourth, Berger is fifth, Frentzen is sixth, Herbert is seventh, and Olivier Panis is eighth. Martin Brundle.
Well, Damon appears to be keeping up a good pace, but I tend to agree with Jonathan. Eddie Irvine was always going to be watching the Ferrari in that situation. He would never have enough capacity left to be watching Damon coming in as well. I'm surprised Damon put his nose into that situation.
Yes, he's twixt the devil and the deep blue sea in many ways, because he would want to be forceful there. He's had criticism, as I said, about not being forceful enough. He's got the knowledge that he's got to get ahead of the people in front of him to try to catch Michael Schumacher, which is a pretty forlorn hope. Schumacher is lapping in 1 minute 17. Hill is lapping in 1 minute 17.6, 6/10 of a second slower on the previous lap, as Alesi comes towards us in third place, 21 seconds behind Michael Schumacher, and David Coulthard closes again on Roberto Moreno to lap him for the second time. That's the gap visually between Michael Schumacher and David Coulthard, the leader, as they go round the right-hander down into the left at Revolver, the left-hander at Piper Corner. So Coulthard, Moreno, a lap behind. Michael Schumacher. Then there's 20 seconds before Jean Alesi appears. So it is a battle now, and very much so, on lap 28 in this 83-lap Pacific Grand Prix, between David Coulthard for his second Grand Prix victory and Michael Schumacher, who will be hoping for his 8th of the year, and he wants to beat Nigel Mansell's record of 9 wins in a season before this year ends and he goes to Ferrari. He's got this race, Suzuka and Australia.
Those graphics tell us that Michael Schumacher is now 4.0 seconds behind David Coulthard. He was 4.9 seconds behind Coulthard. The figure in brackets was the figure that existed on the previous lap. Now, the interesting point here is that we think, I'm pretty sure in fact, that Coulthard and Schumacher are on rather different fuel loads. That short stop of Schumacher's had the positive effect of getting him ahead of Damon Hill and Jean Alesi. The negative effect of it is that it didn't give the Benetton team much chance to get a lot of fuel in that car, and by my reckoning he got about some 40 litres in. That's probably enough for about 16 laps. Now that would mean that Schumacher will need to come into the pits round about lap 36. That's just another 8 laps time, as Damon Hill has a look there with Jean Alesi, closes the door at the hairpin. That's the corner that Hill touched Irvine at, because Hill still driving with that broken front wing end plate. But this would mean that Schumacher will need to pit in the next 8 laps, whilst David Coulthard will be able to keep going, I believe, until around about lap 53, something like that, if we're right. But we're still taking a few stabs at it. Schumacher is taking a second, or did on the last lap, but he's going a little bit quicker than David Coulthard. But it looks like he may well get held up by David Coulthard, and Coulthard certainly won't do anything to let him by. And so it could be that Schumacher's advantage from being on a light fuel load will be thwarted by Coulthard being out in front.
Watch Gerhard Berger in the background. He's closing on Alesi, who is third, and Hill, who is fourth. And we've got news from the Benetton pit from Tony Jardine.
There's also another problem as a result of those 2 Benetton pit stops for Michael Schumacher and Johnny Herbert, because there's a concern amongst the mechanics here that the inside of the rear wheel rims are severely graunched. Something's been rubbing away on the rear suspension, and they've taken the old wheels and tyres that came off from the pit stop, and they've been desperately trying to fit them back up on the T-car, which is up on jack, checking what the problem is. So I'll be watching closely for that in the next set of pit stops.
Keep us in touch, Tony. Meantime, we look at Jean Alesi third, Damon Hill fourth, Coulthard is still ahead of Michael Schumacher by 4 seconds, benefiting as his fuel load decreases and his car gets lighter. In fact, his previous lap was faster than that of Michael Schumacher, who has now gone faster. He's just made the fastest lap of the race, 1 minute 16.6, compared with Schumacher's lap record last year, 1 minute 14 seconds with a 3.5 litre engine. Martin.
As Jonathan pointed out, Schumacher could well be held up by David Coulthard. We all run computer programs that show us whether we should be running 1, 2 or 3 stops, and often there's a point on those lines where the 3-stopper comes up behind the 2-stopper, and that's one thing you can't factor in. You have to hope that he can overtake him when he arrives.
Lap 31, race order. David Coulthard leads Michael Schumacher by 3 seconds. Alesi is third, 25 seconds behind Schumacher, and just a car's length or so ahead of Damon Hill. You're looking at the battle for third position now. The Ferrari third, the Williams is in fourth place. Berger is fifth. 4 seconds behind at this battle. 6th is Johnny Herbert in the points again in the Benetton. Mark Blundell is 7th in the McLaren. Eddie Irvine down to 8th after his pit stop. Heinz-Harald Frentzen is 9th in the Sauber, and 10th still in the top 10 in his first Grand Prix, Jan Magnussen, McLaren Mercedes.
Now let's just think about the problems that the Williams team will be thinking of there, with Hill continuing to have to follow Jean Alesi. We know that both Hill and Alesi stopped for their first stop on lap 20. That's consistent with a 3-stop strategy, and that means that they will probably both be making their second stop around about lap 40. But the Williams dilemma, or one of them, is what do they do fuel-wise to try and make sure that they get Hill out this time ahead of Alesi? Do they put a bit less fuel in and make it a particularly short stop? That idea will certainly not be lost on Ferrari either. Now the other point is, do they try and remedy that end of the front wing, because it's bound to take more than the length of a fuel stop, I suspect, to change the nose. They may well opt to keep it where it is.
Yeah, look at this. David Coulthard has got Michael Schumacher right behind him now. The German is taking great lumps out of Coulthard's lead. It's down to under 2 seconds as Coulthard exits the corner on his 32nd lap, chased by Michael Schumacher's Benetton Renault, still ahead of Jean Alesi. But this race is between these two now as they complete another lap. They go into their 33rd lap. Coulthard on the right, Schumacher on the left. There's the gap. You can see how it is declining from just under 2 seconds to just over 1 second. And they have both been in to make their first fuel stops. We think Coulthard is going to make 1 more. We think Schumacher is going to make 2 more.
Correct, and at this stage Coulthard's car is therefore significantly heavier than that of Schumacher, and that's a good reason why Schumacher's pressurising hard. He's now just 1 second behind Coulthard. You can see that on the gap on the screen, and that's about as close as it's going to get in reality, because I really cannot see, despite his lighter fuel load, Schumacher getting by Coulthard. Coulthard will be keeping running for a good another 15 laps. I'm pretty sure that Schumacher's going to be coming in the next 4 or 5 laps, I would think. And when he does so, at the moment, he's far enough ahead of Alesi, that's 29 seconds, that Schumacher can get in for his second stop and get out ahead of Alesi, so he should stay there in second place.
Katayama is lapped by Alesi and Damon Hill. Martin.
David mustn't take it easy, because if Schumacher keeps this kind of pace up, there's 52 laps to go, remember. He still has time to make yet another pit stop over and above David, and he'll still be ahead of him at the end, so David's got to keep pushing hard.
Here is Alesi, car 27, Damon Hill, car number 5. Up towards Hobbs Corner, named after David Hobbs, second gear, 50 miles an hour. They have got ahead of them Taki Inoue in the Arrows Heart, who moves over and lets them through. He's been lapped twice now by the leaders. David Coulthard leading Schumacher. Right behind David Coulthard is Michael Schumacher. There is the living proof. The Williams Renault leads. The Benetton Renault is second. Coulthard for Scotland. Schumacher for Germany. It's anybody's race at the moment.
Now we know, or certainly believe, that Schumacher's got to stop shortly because he took such a little amount of fuel, but I'm sure David Coulthard does too, because the Williams team will have kept him informed by the radio of when Hill stopped, when Schumacher stopped. They will have also have told Coulthard that he couldn't have taken too much fuel on. Therefore David will know that providing he can just keep precise, not make mistakes, drive round on the line. The Williams is a little bit faster in a straight line, in fact, than the Benetton car. There's only a kilometre or so in it, but it's going to be very difficult for Schumacher to find a way by. But if he can so, this is the kind of opportunity that it could stem from, because Schumacher is really he's all over the back of that Williams now, for sure. David Coulthard is holding up Michael Schumacher, and strategically this is good for Coulthard because he's going as fast as he wants to, and it's bad for Schumacher because he cannot make use of that lighter fuel load.
David Coulthard has pointed out that he has comparatively little experience. Michael Schumacher has driven in 3 times as many Grand Prix as David Coulthard. He's driven in 66 before this one. David Coulthard had driven in 22, and it's a mark of credit to the Scotsman that he's able to keep Michael Schumacher behind him the way he is doing. Now this track is very difficult to pass on, we've seen that. The differential in performance terms between the Williams-Renault and the Benetton-Renault is small. Schumacher is the world champion. David Coulthard has won but one race, but they're very equal at the present moment on lap 35, pursued by Alesi and Hill. There they are, third and fourth, over half a minute behind the battle for the lead, and some 3 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger, who is fifth, some 5 seconds ahead of Johnny Herbert, who is sixth in the points. Mark Blundell is still seventh, Irvine is still eighth, Frentzen is still ninth, and 10th is still Magnussen.
So let's just review the pit stop situation. Lap 35, lap 40 or thereabouts is when I believe those two, Alesi in the Ferrari and Hill in the Williams, will come in for the second of their 3 stops. More confusing, or less clear certainly, is a situation right at the front. We believe David Coulthard will be staying out for quite some time more, another 15 laps, but Schumacher may be coming in the next 2 laps if they intended from the start to have Schumacher on a 3-stop strategy. On the other hand, if Benetton were playing canny, and they're pretty good at doing this, Benetton may have started off with enough fuel to actually do a 2-stop strategy and then elect to bring Schumacher in early. That would mean that even though he took less fuel on, because he had residual fuel in that car, he may still have enough to take him through to, let's say, round about lap 40 or thereafter, because that's the way they planned it. So it may well be that we don't see Schumacher come in the next lap or 2.
Complicated, isn't it? Well, we're with Michael Schumacher now, going through to complete another lap, to complete the 36th lap, and there ahead of him you see, and he sees, David Coulthard.
Yes, I tend to think Schuey will be on a 3-stop. His car's been an animal all weekend on old tyres, but also I just hope they bring Hill in early, even if it's 5 or 6 laps before his scheduled stop, just to give him track position. Alesi's costing him well over a second per lap, and the World Championship is just going down the pan. He needs to get track position, then try and get himself into the motor race.
They're coming up behind the Ligier, passing the Ligier of Olivier Panis, who is in 12th position, and Michael Schumacher comes right up under the rear wing of David Coulthard's Williams-Renault. But Coulthard knows he's there. He can see exactly what the situation is in his mirrors. He doesn't need any pit signals. They're coming up now to Rubens Barrichello and Magnussen, who are fighting for 11th and 10th places. And the further up the field they get, the more difficult it's going to be for them to pass the men ahead, because they are more experienced, their cars are going better. And in the case of Barrichello and Magnussen, absolutely together, with Magnussen 10th, Barrichello 11th. They are, of course, fighting their own battle and will be watching each other rather than the people who are bearing down on them. Coulthard leads there. Schumacher second there. This is lap 37, the start of. And they are 35 seconds ahead of Jean Alesi and Damon Hill.
Well, bearing in mind that Schumacher hasn't stopped by now, and at the moment we've no indication. We just hear, in fact, the Benetton pit are getting ready. The longer, what I was going to say is that the longer that Michael Schumacher stays out, the better it is for David Coulthard, because David Coulthard knows that he's holding Michael Schumacher up, and that's good news for him. That actually helps him. But another battle, actually, that we're seeing nothing of as the Benetton team get ready for what must be Michael Schumacher, is that of Johnny Herbert, who's actually close to within 1.7 seconds of Gerhard Berger.
So, who's coming in? This is lap 38. Coulthard leads Schumacher by the distance that you can see. They are 34 seconds ahead of a close battle between Alesi and Hill for third position. Berger is 3.5 seconds behind Hill in fifth place. Johnny Herbert is 2.8 seconds behind Berger in sixth position in the points. Mark Blundell still seventh for McLaren Mercedes. Eddie Irvine eighth way in the Jordan Peugeot. And into the pits comes Michael Schumacher from second place, and this, of course, is a gift for David Coulthard. The gap was under half a second, and Michael Schumacher comes in for his second stop. Just a slight delay getting the hose out. It's very, very heavy, very, very ponderous. It needs 2 men to support it. and Coulthard is scorching his way through the tail enders. He's just gone ahead of Pedro Diniz for the third time as Barrichello moves up and takes Magnussen and 10th position, and right behind them is David Coulthard. So Coulthard on lap 39 out of 83 has lapped everybody up to Jan Magnussen in the McLaren, who is now in 11th position.
And significantly, as the Williams team get ready for another stop, significantly we saw Schumacher get out ahead of Jean Alesi. So Schumacher remains there in second place, whilst this stop must surely be for Damon Hill. Now we need to see the Williams team work to get Hill in front of Jean Alesi at this stop. Now they need to do that, I believe, by making A, a faultless stop, and B, by making it a short stop, perhaps making it a little bit less than 1/4 length of fuel. He'll be in, I suspect, at the end of this lap, and we may well see a stop of around about 7 or 8 seconds. Again, let's watch the fuel pipe. Ferrari are getting ready as well. This is going to be a replay of the very first stop, and they're going to have to try and double guess each other because they will each know that this stop is going to be crucial in terms of getting ahead, because if Hill can get ahead of Alesi on the track, he'll pull away. If not, he'll get blocked once again.
And you're looking at Rubens Barrichello as into the pits comes Damon Hill. Now, where is Jean Alesi?
Yes, Alesi hasn't come in, he's gone round. That's a pity for him. I mean, Ferrari are asleep there. They're 1 lap too late, because Alesi can hold Hill all the way into his box, because his garage is before Hill's. He's lost that advantage and he's gone round. That's a pity for him. I mean, Ferrari are asleep there. They're 1 lap too late, because Alesi can hold Hill all the way into his box, because his garage is before Hill's. He's lost that advantage. Now Damon should be able to get ahead of him on the racetrack.
Here is Damon Hill's second stop. Schumacher has stopped twice. It's a nice clean stop. Out he goes.
Well, Johnny Herbert comes in for his second stop as well. 9.6 on that for Damon Hill. Now that was not, to my mind, a particularly quick stop. Now I think that's played into the hands of Ferrari a bit, because Ferrari can see now how short they need to keep Alesi in the pits to make sure they get Alesi out ahead of Hill once again. And that sort of stop, the 9.6 seconds for Hill, was quite a long time, and it won't be difficult for Alesi to, or rather for Ferrari, to simply put maybe 10 litres less fuel in that car to keep him ahead.
And you're looking at Michael Schumacher. You were coming through to complete his lap behind David Coulthard, and now we see the Ferrari of Jean Alesi, and Michael Schumacher's just made the fastest lap of the race as into the pits comes Alesi, and the gap between Schumacher and Coulthard on lap 41 is 18.18 seconds. Alesi stopping from third position. Berger's got ahead of Hill to fourth on account of Hill's stop. So this is a crucial stop for the Ferrari team and for Jean Alesi. Can he hold the position that he had ahead of Damon Hill?
He's a half a second faster than Damon in the pit stop. It's all down to now how fast was Damon on his outlap, and I think he's just gone past.
And Damon Hill sails past as we look at Michael Schumacher going faster and faster on lap 41, closing up on Pedro Diniz's 40 to lap it for the fourth time in 41 laps. And Coulthard still leads now, where as near as makes no difference, halfway through the Pacific Grand Prix at the Aida circuit, Coulthard leads, having stopped once. You're looking at Michael Schumacher, second, having stopped twice. Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi and Damon Hill and Johnny Herbert are the next four. And that is an Arrows stopping, but which one it is, whether it's Inoue or Morbidelli, I know not until a crash helmet or a number appears which I can identify it with. If it's Inoue, of course, it will be a pity for Japan and for him, because this is his home Grand Prix. But as you watch that, and it's Inoue. There we are, Taki Inoue from 18th position out of the race, lap 42. Coulthard leads Schumacher by 17 plus seconds. Berger is third. Hill is in fourth position, but has stopped twice to Berger's once. Alesi is fifth, so Damon Hill is ahead of the Ferrari. In fact, he's sandwiched between Berger third and Alesi fourth, with Johnny Herbert sixth.
Well, not for very long, I don't think, because Ferrari are getting ready for their second stop, therefore that's for Berger. Now Berger is 15 seconds ahead of Damon Hill. His stop's going to take him 23, 25 seconds. So that means Hill is now, after this stop from Berger, going to be straight behind Michael Schumacher. So he's going to be some way behind. Having said that, he's going to be about 37 seconds behind Michael Schumacher, but at least he's on fresh tyres and he should be able to really charge to see what he can do. But I'm sure they did nothing, and indeed we can look at that car and it's still got the broken front wing. As we said, there wasn't enough time in that fuel stop to do anything about it, so Hill's going to have to live with its deficit. I don't suppose it's enormous. It's probably worth a couple of seconds a lap, I would think.
Berger comes in, and that will allow Damon Hill up into third position. But Michael Schumacher is flying. He's just made the fastest lap of the race. That's a good stop by Gerhard Berger, 8 seconds.
Second to 3 stops for Berger, and that was the kind of brevity of stop that I would expected them to have done for a Lacey. Nevertheless, and in fact if they had done so, we may well have seen a Lacey out ahead of Damon Hill. I just said 2 seconds a lap as a deficit for that front wing end plate missing on Damon Hill. I actually meant 0.2 of a second, so not a great deal. Nevertheless, could be significant, but more fundamentally it's indicative, it's the consequence of another little mistake from Damon Hill.
Well, once again, the top 3 in the World Championship who started from the top 3 places on the grid are in the top 3 race positions in the race, but in the wrong positions as far as Damon Hill, what we're looking at, is concerned, as he comes up behind the Tyrrell of, I think it was Befazor, because Coulthard is leading Schumacher by nearly 16 seconds now, and Damon Hill is some 39 seconds behind Michael Schumacher. Schumacher, I remind you, needs 3 points for the World Championship this year. He's on 6 points at the present moment. And there is Damon Hill coming through to complete the lap, to complete his 43rd lap, as we join David Coulthard in the lead. Now, Alesi and Berger are 4th and 5th, as they were on the grid. In fact, there's only one change in the top 5 compared with the grid, and that is that Schumacher is ahead of Damon Hill in that vital second place. And Damon has certainly got it all to do. 6th is still Johnny Herbert, higher in the race than he was on the grid, and you look now at Coulthard, who has lapped Rubens Barrichello. In fact, he's lapped everybody up to Heinz-Harald Frentzen in the Sauber, who's in 8th position. So, reverse order for the top 8 who have not been lapped. Frentzen is 8th, Irvine is 7th in the Jordan, Johnny Herbert is 6th in the Benetton, Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi 5th and 4th in the Ferraris. Damon Hill is in 3rd position. There is the race leader, David Coulthard, and he is now 14.5 seconds ahead of Schumacher, who is consistently, or has for the last 3 laps, been taking a second a lap out of David Coulthard's lead.
Yes, Murray. David, I hope they're on the radio to him, because he's losing this race as we speak right now. Michael, they've both got 1 stop left to do. Schumacher's just taking loads of time out of him every lap, and he's going to feel comfortable. He's led the thing so supremely, but he's losing this race, and they need to be on the radio to him now to get his welly down a bit.
Well, once again, you have to say that the ability of the Benetton tacticians, led by Ross Brawn, Pat Simmons, and of course the driver himself, everybody else who's concerned, who sits down and tries to work out how the race is going before it even starts, has proved superb. Because Coulthard is in that, Schumacher is in that strong position as we ride with Gerhard Berger. This is the Ferrari, it is in 5th position, and we're going through the left-hander, which leads up towards Redman, another left-hander, towards the end of the lap. Gerhard Berger with Alesi behind him, and the 2 Ferraris are together on the track. And we're on lap 46 now. There's still a long way to go, but things are looking set, as you see the replay of Gerhard Berger going through and taking his teammate. So Gerhard Berger crosses the line ahead of Jean Alesi up into 4th position. And he is lapping in 1 minute 18.6, which is a second a lap slower than race leader David Coulthard, whose fuel load is decreasing after his 1 stop. Still got another stop to do, and it's getting very close, and it's running in favour, one has to say, of Michael Schumacher, the way things are going at the present moment.
Certainly at this stage, Coulthard needs to do whatever he can. We're lap 46. I believe Coulthard's second of 2 stops will be round about lap 53, 54, something like that. Schumacher's third of 3 stops, lap 60, and the same or thereabouts for Damon Hill, Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi, and indeed Johnny Herbert. So at the moment it's Coulthard alone of the front runners who's gone for a 2-stop strategy, or rather the Williams team in conjunction with Coulthard. And it remains to be seen as to whether or not that will work. We do know that from a simple stop time that the 3 stopping people will be in the pits for 2 seconds shorter. They'll need to put 2 seconds less worth of fuel in those cars. The stops are worth round about 25 seconds, but so it'll be about, let's say, 23 seconds lost if you're making the third of 3 stops, and maybe 25 seconds lost if you're making the second of 2. But of course the other difference is the amount of weight in the car, and the advantage that the 3-stopper runners should have over 2-stopping is about 0.3 of a second a lap on average. And so that's another reason why Coulthard should continue to charge hard. But he's doing pretty well at the moment, I must say. I think it's all certainly far from lost for David Coulthard. He's got a 14-second margin over Michael Schumacher. It's just slipped down to 13, but traffic's playing its part. He's got to keep going. It's a bit too early yet to tell how it's going to be, but it's definitely going to be close.
Michael Schumacher, the fastest lap of the race so far, 1 minute 16.4, which is 2.4 seconds slower than his own fastest lap last year. He dominated this race last year, led it from the first corner to the checkered flag. And he's now 13 seconds behind David Coulthard. There is Coulthard in the Williams Renault, and Damon Hill is nearly 41 seconds behind Michael Schumacher. So it's looking very, very black indeed for Damon Hill. It's looking very bright indeed for Michael Schumacher, not just in terms of a high race finish here in Japan at the Aida circuit, but in terms of clinching the World Championship with 2 races to go. The earliest I can remember a World Championship being finished was when Nigel Mansell won it in Hungary in 1992. That was the 10th race of the year, and this is the 15th race of the year, a mark of Mansell's dominance in 1992. And it looks as though Pedro Diniz has decided that's enough. He pulls the 40 off the side of the road from 19th position.
I don't know how close they are to Coulthard's next stop, but I hope they bring him in early. He's just coming up to the back of 4 cars. It's going to cost him 6 or 7 seconds minimum.
Yes, and 2 of them are Eddie Irvine and Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who are continuing to fight for 7th and 8th positions. There's Irvine in the orange helmet ahead of Okayama, who's passed by Frentzen, who has got the Benetton right behind him.
Well, there's no doubt Coulthard's losing time with that traffic, but I'm afraid there's no way that Williams can bring him in just yet, because he needs to do a lot more laps yet before they can bring him in. He's shaking his fist at Frentzen. He really wants to get it out of the way, because if he'd stopped now, he would have to do another 35 laps on his last set of tyres, and that's just too many. Now, I've done a few calculations here. Now, Schumacher was 13 seconds behind David Coulthard. Now, if we assume that he's going to gain 2 seconds on this pit stop merely by fuel volume, that means he's really 11 seconds behind. There are some 35 laps to go, and that means that if Schumacher needs to take off 0.3 of a second a lap off Coulthard for them to be even. It really is very close. And maybe I'm absolutely wrong. I beg your pardon. It looks as if they are perhaps going to bring Coulthard in.
Yep, the Williams technicians there ready for somebody, and it's surely David Coulthard, because he's being held up by Heinz-Harald Frentzen in the Sauber Ford, trying desperately to get past him. Remember, Damon Hill had the same sort of situation in the Grand Prix of Europe at the Nürburgring, and past Frentzen Sauber Ford goes David Coulthard. The German gives way, having been gesticulated at fiercely by David Coulthard. Let me by, I am actually a lap ahead of you. even though I'm just behind you, if you follow me, Martin.
But David's just got to get his head back down again now and forget that frustration. When he passes the pits next time, he's going to learn he lost 3.2 seconds on the last lap to Schumacher.
And he can't afford to do that. He realises that. He's really pushing, locks up his tyres, and this is lap 50.
So in he comes. Now the critical thing here, is this not indeed the last of 2, but is it the second of 3? If this stop is going to be around about 8 seconds, 7 or 8 seconds, I think it's going to be the second of 3. Otherwise, it'll need to be 11 or 12 seconds to get to the very end. Let's watch.
So past the pits goes Michael Schumacher as David Coulthard is taking his second stop. And on lap 51 out of 83, Michael Schumacher leads the Pacific Grand Prix after a superlative drive, and out goes David Coulthard. Well, David Coulthard is still in second place ahead of Damon Hill, a long way ahead of Damon Hill, but how are things going to go from the point of view of victory? Michael Schumacher now on fresh tyres, the wisdom of his qualifying strategy, where he deliberately went out for lap after lap yesterday on worn tyres in order to preserve as many new sets as he could for the race, to give him the maximum grip and the best possible traction and car handling, is certainly being proved, because Schumacher is now leading. Coulthard is down to second place, 27 seconds ahead of Damon Hill, who is third. Benetton leads, Williams second and third, and Schumacher is up behind Rubens Barrichello. Rubens Barrichello in the Jordan Peugeot.
And Michael's going to have to be very rude with these two, otherwise he's going to lose the advantage he gained with the other traffic. It'll be interesting to see just how aggressive he's going to be.
Well, Barrichello was rude enough to get past the Tyrrell, and now Schumacher has done the same thing. Now he's got the young Brazilian in front of him. There he is in front of us now as we go through the Moss S curve at 160 miles an hour. Slow down to 95 miles an hour for the Atwood curve. Now, foot hard down, uphill slightly, over the crest, into the top straight at 180 miles an hour. Brake hard for the hairpin, which is second gear, 45 miles an hour, and he's going past Rubens Barrichello to lap him. It's not the first time, so Michael Schumacher will have been held up by the Jordan Peugeot of Rubens Barrichello. Is it going to make that much of a difference?
Well, the crucial thing is now, does David Coulthard have to come back into the pits for another stop? Now, from that length of pit stop, if you are following it closely, you'll know it's not easy to say, because it was a little bit short to be definitely the second of 2, the second of 2, and rather long to be the second of 3. But it's my guess that Williams did indeed bring Coulthard in maybe 3 or 4 laps earlier than they intended, as Martin quite correctly indicated, that they brought him in early. Therefore, he had 3 or 4 laps worth of fuel still left in that car. Therefore, they didn't have to put in quite as much as they otherwise would. So, the net result of all of that is that I think David Coulthard's made his last pit stop. I very much hope he has. And if that's the case, I'd expect him to actually drop away a bit from Schumacher, because his car is going to be pretty heavy at this point, heavier in fact than any driver's car in the race so far. If he's got to get all the way to the end, and that's now some 31 laps on this tank of fuel. The other problem of that strategy is that towards the end of that, he will, towards the end of the race, the last 10 or so laps, he's going to be really struggling, because the tyres are going to be in pretty poor shape. But he will be ahead, because at the moment Michael Schumacher is only 13.8 seconds ahead of David Coulthard. I think Schumacher will need to make his final stop in 8 laps' time. Now, that's certain to put him behind Coulthard. So the question is, can Coulthard hold off Schumacher, who will undoubtedly be quicker, in the closing 10 or 15 laps of the race?
Now, I understand you've lost pictures. I'm delighted to tell you that we haven't. We've got enough problems here without losing pictures. And we're watching the fastest man on the track, who is Damon Hill. And he's just lapped 1.5 seconds faster than Schumacher. He has just lapped a second faster than David Coulthard. Hill, who is in third position. You've got pictures back, I believe. You're looking at Eddie Irvine in the Jordan coming in from 8th position. And just to bring you back literally into the picture, Michael Schumacher on lap 54 out of 83 in the Pacific Grand Prix is 15, nearly 16 seconds ahead of David Coulthard. They've both stopped twice. We think David Coulthard may not be stopping again. We think Schumacher, that you're looking at in the lead, will be stopping once more. Damon Hill, third position, fastest on the track, but he is 23 seconds behind behind Michael Schumacher in the lead. So Damon Hill has got a gigantic mountain to climb. Gerhard Berger is in fourth position, 52 seconds behind Schumacher. John Alesi is in fifth position in the Ferrari, 58 seconds behind Schumacher. Johnny Herbert is still in the points. Both Benettons in the points, both Williams cars in the points. The Benettons of Schumacher and Herbert first and sixth. The Williams of Coulthard and Hill second and third. And in those fourth and fifth places, the two Ferraris of Berger and Alesi. So it's the top three teams in the top 6 places.
And in that last lap, this man Michael Schumacher has pulled out 2 seconds over David Coulthard, but he's going to need to keep doing that and more, because he's going to have to do his very best as Frentzen comes into the pits for his second stop. Surely he's going to need to do he's going out, I beg your pardon. He's going to need to do his very best to pull out 22, 23, 24 seconds, somewhere around there, over David Coulthard, so he can get out after that third pit stop ahead of David Coulthard. Quite frankly, if that happens, and the way it's looking, it's quite possible it's going to be the end of Coulthard's chances of winning that race, because if Schumacher gets ahead, he'll just pull away to the flag.
Well, there he is on his 55th lap, and there is David Coulthard. Down into the left-hander at Piper. Well, he's got one car ahead of him here on the track. It's Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who's in 7th position. Only 6 of the cars and drivers are on the same lap 55. They are Schumacher, Coulthard, Hill, Berger, Alesi and Herbert. Frentzen, you're watching Damon Hill now. Frentzen has been lapped in 7th position. Parnish has been lapped in 8th position. So have Irvine 9th, Blundell 10th, Barrichello 11th, Magnussen in 11th place. Katayama, who is 13th in the Tyrrell for his home race, his first of 2 home races in Japan, has been lapped twice. So has Gianni Morbidelli.
Well, Schumacher is really piling on the pressure. He's pulled out another 2 seconds over David Coulthard. On lap 55, Schumacher is now 20 seconds ahead of Coulthard. Now, if he keeps this up in the next 5 laps, that will mean that he's another, 8 to 10 seconds ahead. That's enough to give him the cushion that he needs. Schumacher needs to have 25 seconds lead over David Coulthard before he comes in for that pit stop if he's going to stay ahead.
And on the last lap, he went round 2.2 seconds faster than David Coulthard. Can he keep it up? Well, he's supremely fit. I told you earlier on how nervous the car is. You're looking now at Damon Hill in 3rd position, who has just lapped Jan Magnussen in 12th position. I was saying that Michael Schumacher is supremely fit, quite the fittest of all the very fit drivers, I think. The Benetton, which is a very nervous, difficult to drive, car to drive, is nevertheless set up exactly the way Michael Schumacher wants it to be. The whole team is built around him. One wonders what's going to happen next year when Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi leave the Ferrari team at the end of this season and join Benetton, because the car is going to have to be very different for them than it is for Michael Schumacher. Martin.
Schumacher's going to earn about as much money next year as the rest of the drivers put together, and it's not difficult to see why on this performance and in Nürburgring also. He's in a class of his own at the moment.
Well, we all have problems. I wish I'd got his, but at the present moment, of course, Schumacher is absolutely walking it for the 2nd World Championship in succession. 1994, notwithstanding the fact that his points came from 12 of the 16 races because of various problems that he had, and here he is going to be well ahead of Damon Hill at the end of this race. There is Damon Hill in 3rd position. He is closing the gap. It's down to 20 seconds now on lap 58 out of 83.
As we look at Jean Alesi about to come into the pits for his third and final stop, but just 3.7 seconds behind Alesi is Johnny Herbert. So we've got quite a battle on between Herbert and Alesi.
And watch Alesi while I tell you that everyone here is wishing Johnny Herbert luck in this race, because he is out of the Benetton team at the end of this season, and he's being replaced by Alesi, and Schumacher is being replaced by Berger, and Johnny Herbert has not yet, as far as we know, got a seat for 1996. It rather looks as though the Tyrrell seat that he was hoping to get in place of Okayama is in fact going to be occupied by the Japanese driver. Alesi from 5th position into the pits, and I've got a weather eye open for Johnny Herbert to come through as the Ferrari mechanics get ready to change those 4 wheels and tyres. Herbert goes through up into 5th position. So it's Schumacher, Coulthard, Hill, Berger 4th, Johnny Herbert in the 2nd Benetton is in 5th position, and this is not helping very much the Williams team's hope of cutting down the 20 points gap between themselves and Benetton for the Constructors' Championship. At the moment, Schumacher is on 10 points, Herbert is on 2, so that's 12 points. Compared with the 10 that Coulthard and Hill have got. So Benetton are going to be even further ahead.
But as Gerhard Berger gets the pit sign for the 2nd Ferrari final stop, I think things are looking better for David Coulthard, because in the last 3 laps Schumacher has not pulled out anything. The gap is 20.7, and Schumacher will need to come in, I'm sure, in the next 2 or 3 laps, and if that's the case, he's going to come out behind David Coulthard after all.
Into the pits, out of the pits, I'm sorry, goes Jean, I'll get it right in a minute, into the pits, comes Gerhard Berger in the Ferrari from 4th position. And this is, the leaders now are on lap 59 out of 83. Off the jacks, onto the wheels, back into the race goes Gerhard Berger, who's driven more races for Ferrari in World Championship events than anybody else in the team's history.
Yes, I think Michael just had a couple of laps of traffic because he's pulled out another second on that lap. So it's going to be close. If he ends up behind David Coulthard after his next stop, of course he'll be on fresh tyres and the same amount of fuel, so it'll be a good scrap to the end. He'll be a difficult man to keep behind. In fact, he took 1.2 seconds on that lap. Schumacher took 1.2 seconds from Coulthard.
Williams are getting ready to bring Hill in, and you saw the Benetton mechanics are already there as Michael Schumacher rounds the hairpin, which is roughly halfway round the lap, goes into Piper, and now Redmond corner. He's lapping David Coulthard by he's leading David Coulthard by just under 22 seconds, having taken another second out and having put another second on his lead to raise it to nearly 22 seconds. And sure enough, into the pits for his 3rd stop comes Michael Schumacher.
And the question is, will he get out in front of David Coulthard?
So you watch Schumacher, I'm watching the track and Schumacher at the same time. The seconds are ticking past. There's one car past, there's a Ferrari past. Schumacher still in the pit lane. It's going to be a desperately close run thing. Schumacher blasting his way out of the pit lane, and I look down and he's ahead. He is ahead of David Coulthard. Now he's on tyres which aren't quite as warm as they need to be. This will give Coulthard the opportunity to close up a little, but not, I'm sure, the opportunity to pass.
Well, they're not quite as warm, but they are brand new, and that's going to make the difference. I'm afraid it's all over as Damon Hill comes in for his 3rd and final stop. It's all over really now for David Coulthard, because Schumacher is going to be, I'm sure, 2 seconds ahead at the end of this lap, a gap that will then increase by 1.5 seconds a lap for the next few laps. So let's just watch Hill's stop, make sure nothing goes wrong with that. He's currently in 3rd position.
He goes. Now, he was 29 seconds ahead of Johnny Herbert, so there's no problem there for Damon Hill in terms of retaining his third position, but it's no consolation to him, because the man above all others that he had to beat, Michael Schumacher, in the hope of keeping his desperately thin World Championship hopes alive, is ahead of him. Ahead of him, leading the race, there is the man who is second, David Coulthard. Hopefully we'll see both of them, Schumacher in the lead and Coulthard in second place, in shot together. There they are. There's Schumacher across the line. The gap was 4.6 seconds. And David Coulthard is still, well, it's 4.7 seconds now. So already Michael Schumacher on lap 62 out of 83 has started to pull away, looking good for a superb 8th win out of the 15 races that he will have driven in this year, to be only one victory behind Nigel Mansell's record of 9 wins in one season.
As we said, David lost this race in the midsection a full 20 or 30 laps ago, and it's allowed him, he didn't have enough pace. It's now given Schumacher track position, and he cannot defend that in any way now. He's just got to play catch up, and he doesn't have the tyres to do it with.
Well, I'm not entirely sure if he lost it in the midsection. I really wonder if it was lost on the strategy, because Williams have been unusual, apart from the Jordan cars, in going for a 2-stop strategy. Certainly the theory, as Herbert comes into the pits, now we just need to see if he can get ahead of Gerhard Berger. I think it's highly unlikely, despite Benetton's technique. We'll have a look. But this race, really, I think if it's been lost anywhere, it is with the strategy of the Williams team with David Coulthard. Coulthard started on pole. They knew he was going to have a clear track, but clearly there was enough fuel in that car for him to get to lap 25 before he stopped, when if they'd been going for a straightforward 3-stop strategy, they would have stopped him round about lap 18, lap 19, lap 20, as with Damon Hill. Just maybe that was part of their plan, to give Hill a bit of an advantage, but we shouldn't forget that Schumacher, who is now going to win this race, any kind of problem keeping away, but Schumacher was bogged down in the start. He dropped down to 4th place in the early stages, and despite that, he's still, by virtue of a better strategy with really tactical pit stops, he's now ahead. And a great example of what we've seen so often this year, the fact that the Williams cars can be on pole position. After all, Hill's been on pole or rather Williams cars have been on pole a great deal this year, but ultimately it's been the Benetton and Schumacher who come out in front when it comes to the racing and getting it right over a full 200-mile race distance.
You look at Schumacher, who has now lapped his teammate Johnny Herbert and is closing up on Jean Alesi, who is in 5th position. Martin?
Yes, I hear what you're saying on the strategy, Jonathan, but he's still, if you're on a 2-stop strategy, the big advantage you do have is track position. You should have. The guy on the 3-stop has to pass you at some stage, and as we saw earlier in the race, that's not particularly easy to do here once they get in your dirty ear and they get sort of mesmerised behind your gearbox. But nonetheless, that didn't happen, and Schuey is cruising now to what looks like another World Championship, barring mechanical problems or a silly mishap with a back marker.
And in so doing, he closes up on Jean Alesi. That is the leader, Michael Schumacher. There is Pedro Diniz, who yet again sees Schumacher go past him. That's the 5th time that's happened in this race. And Schumacher's next target, for the sake of keeping his concentration up, is Jean Alesi. That's Jan Magnussen in the pit lane, stopping from 12th position. It looks as though he's going to finish his first Grand Prix and get very valuable experience in the process, and he might even finish in the top 10 by the time this race is over. There's still 20 laps to go. Schumacher leads Coulthard by 6.5 seconds. Coulthard is some 43 seconds ahead of Damon Hill, who is some 11 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger, who is some 7 seconds ahead of Jean Alesi, 5th. Johnny Herbert has been lapped in 6th position. Heinz-Harald Frentzen is 7th. Irvine is 8th. Barrichello is 9th, and Olivier Panis is 10th.
And we're looking at Michael Schumacher about to lap Jean Alesi ahead of him. But a great effort from Magnussen, I think. His first Grand Prix, he was really thrown in the deep end when it was suddenly announced to him that Hakkinen had appendicitis and was recovering from it. He's made no mistakes at all, and he's only running 7 seconds behind Mark Blundell through what's a pretty grueling race. So I think it's a great performance. I think we're going to see more of this chap.
Yes, I watched the warm-up from out on various corners, and I have to say Magnussen was very consistent and driving very nicely. He's done a very mature job for his first Grand Prix.
And now only 4 cars and drivers on lap 65 out of 83 are on the same lap as Michael Schumacher in a magnificent rhythm, remorselessly catches and passes everybody ahead of him. And those drivers who are all on the same lap are Schumacher, who is 7 seconds ahead of Coulthard, Hill, who is in 3rd place and not likely to make any progress unless one of the 2 men in front of him strike a problem, Gerhard Berger, who is in 4th. Lacey, you've just seen lapped, and just look at Michael Schumacher, literally with his head down in that distinctive way that he drives, right on top of the car. Ferrari are understood to have invested something like £16 million a year in him next season, and it looks as though that money is going to be very well spent.
Yes, Schumacher is without doubt the best driver in Formula One, and by quite some margin, there's no doubt about that. But of course, he is, albeit the most important, but a member in a team, and the Benetton team really have been superb. And I think that the refuelling that we've seen for the last 2 seasons really has opened a new dimension of teamwork to Formula One these days. The fascination of it, the opportunity that it provides, because if it wasn't for the refuelling stops, we wouldn't have seen Schumacher and the Benetton team being able to optimise their situation and get ahead of a Lacey and Hill in the early stages. But to give us an example of just how efficient they are, with Schumacher's pace on entry into the pit lane, how fast he gets coming out of the pit lane, and also, of course, fundamentally how slick the Benetton team are. If we look again at this length of time that the leading drivers were in the pit lane on that final stop, when we know they would all be putting in the same amount of fuel, roughly 55 litres. Damon Hill was 25.7 seconds, start of the pit lane to the end, to include the stop. Jean Lacey, 25.3. Gerhard Berger, 26.4. But Michael Schumacher, 24.2. He gained 1.5 seconds on Damon Hill for the same amount of fuel going in the car.
Riding with David Coulthard, who is about to lap Johnny Herbert, who is 6th.
If Michael Schumacher gets out of his car at the end of this race without a bead of sweat on him, I'm going to go and slap him personally.
He will, Martin, he will, he always does, and he will bound about on the podium the way he always does, and it's delightful to see a Grand Prix driver who is really happy with life and enjoys his success as Schumacher does. Coulthard has now passed Johnny Herbert and lapped the man who is in 6th position, so Herbert has been lapped by Michael Schumacher, race leader, now nearly 10 seconds ahead of Coulthard, the man you are watching. And it looks as though David Coulthard is going to have his 4th second place of the year, having already finished there in Brazil and Germany and Hungary. It means that the gap between Hill, who is 2nd in the World Championship, and Coulthard, who is 3rd, is going to have been reduced by 2 points from 12 to 10, assuming that they stay in 2nd and 3rd places. It means to say that Damon Hill, who will have lost the World Championship here to Michael Schumacher if Schumacher wins this race and Hill finishes 3rd, is going to be in danger of losing 2nd place to his teammate David Coulthard, who will have the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka next weekend, and then the Australian Grand Prix in Adelaide on November the 12th, further to close the gap between himself and Hill. And the way Coulthard is driving, and I remind you that he started from pole position in the last 4 races, the last 3 of them ahead of his teammate Damon Hill, who was 2nd on the grid, and of course the 4th one in Italy ahead of Schumacher, who was 2nd on the grid. And the way Coulthard has driven in this race, he can do that. Martin.
Yes, I mean, Michael's just enjoying himself now. He's just done a lap that's 2/10 of the fastest lap of the race by him. And he's just really enjoying himself. He's not easing off, he's not thinking about his championship, just like when he went around the outside of a Lacey in the Nürburgring. He's just really enjoying himself.
And indeed, you do have to wonder why, when Schumacher and the Benetton team have failed to be on pole position so often this year, that they can be winning Grand Prix so often. 7 wins for Schumacher this season, about to become an 8th. And I think looking at the reasons for it, it does seem that the Williams car is frankly the quicker car. And the reason that Schumacher and Benetton are winning Grand Prix is because Schumacher is frankly, the faster driver. He's not just faster, he's also more consistent. He's able to keep right on the limit for longer. He doesn't tend to make mistakes, and he's able to think in the car as well as drive, and to coordinate with the Benetton team, who are really sharp, to make the best possible use of their equipment to get out and win Grand Prix. And it really is what a privilege to look at this operation being so effective. And thinking that this chap, as one of the Jordans pulls off, it looks like Rubens Barrichello, I think, there. Or perhaps a problem with the Peugeot engine, as we've seen so often this year. But Schumacher bogged down in fourth, third place on the grid. You know, it really looked to be yet another race that should have gone Williams' way, and it hasn't.
And very worrying for Damon Hill, of course, who, as I said earlier on, has been under all sorts of pressure here about his driving and about his ability to win the World Championship after the previous races, and particularly what happened in the Grand Prix of Europe. He's going to have been comprehensively beaten by Michael Schumacher and David Coulthard, because he's now 54 seconds behind the race leader Schumacher. He's 42 seconds behind Coulthard as you watch this replay of Rubens Barrichello retiring from 9th position on lap 69 and very sadly walking away, leaving his teammate Eddie Irvine still in the race in 8th place. That's Schumacher.
Yes, Jordan continued to have a lot of problems, or perhaps not a lot, but quite a few problems with the Peugeot engine, which is a bit surprising after this length of time. And indeed, Peugeot do have, although that didn't look like a spectacular flaming or certainly not smoking expiry, Peugeot do have a system on the car by which if anything goes awry, be it pressures or temperatures, the electronics shut down the engine to make sure that they prevent a really spectacular blow up. And maybe that's what's happened there.
I am beginning to wonder whether Michael Schumacher has set himself a target of lapping in this race his World Championship rival of Damon Hill, because he's catching Gerhard Berger. You can see the gap, or you will do when you see both the cars in the picture together. There's the Ferrari ahead of Michael Schumacher, and effectively that means Berger in 4th position is about a minute and 16 seconds behind Michael Schumacher in a lap that's taking about 1 minute 18 seconds. And Damon Hill is some 55 seconds now behind race leader Michael Schumacher. The race order on lap 71 out of 83. Race leader Michael Schumacher, there he is. He's now 12 seconds ahead of David Coulthard, who is 42 seconds ahead of Damon Hill, who is 21 seconds ahead of 4th place Gerhard Berger, who's soon to be lapped by Schumacher. Berger is 12 seconds ahead of Jean Alesi, who is in 5th place. Jean Alesi is 5 seconds ahead of 6th place Johnny Herbert. Frentzen is 7th, Irvine is 8th. Harness has moved up into 9th position now that Barrichello has retired. Blundell and Magnussen are still just in the double figure places, 10th and 11th for the two McLaren Mercedes. And incidentally, this race is very little encouragement for them, because Mark Blundell's last lap was some 3 seconds slower than that of Michael Schumacher, and McLaren and Mercedes, a mighty combination on paper, have not proved to be that in 1995, and sadly do not show any signs at the present moment of getting better.
No, indeed not. But what this has been is a race that's been relatively easy on cars, and particularly engines, because of the 24 starters, 18 are still running, and that's meant that the chances for the mid to back end cars to pick up a decent position really are pretty slim. And in fact, the Minardi team have done very well this weekend, with leading driver Lamy qualifying in 14th place, but Lamy is only able to run in 13th place, albeit 7 seconds behind Salo.
Oh, Michael Schumacher has got his next target. Oh, look at that lot in front of him. And that's Pedro Diniz, who is in front of him, Berger, and Berger waves his hand. Now, whether that was to say I'm going to move over or you are going to stay where you are, I know not. But Berger in front of the Benetton is in 4th place, virtually a full lap behind Michael Schumacher, who is leading this race on lap 72. Just 11 laps left now. Coming towards us there is Magnussen, followed by the Tyrrell, and Schumacher having a look as Diniz moves over and allows the Ferrari 4th place and the Benetton 1st place to go through.
Now, bearing in mind that only once this year has Schumacher retired from a Grand Prix from a mechanical failure, and that was in Germany, the greatest threat to him winning this Grand Prix is going to come from coming unstuck because of some errant back marker hasn't looked in his mirrors as he comes through. Now this is the greatest risk. You see how even there Schumacher is still fighting hard. The Benetton really being what we call quite a pointy car. That means the front is very carefully pinned down and that the back tends to slide. Berger lets Schumacher go by. That's the right thing to do because Berger clearly knows that Schumacher's faster, but that now leaves Schumacher with the role of then carving through those back markers. He's got Magnussen ahead of him in the McLaren. There's Blundell, there's Magnussen, there's Katayama, and certainly Schumacher will need to remember that Magnussen is new to Formula One. He already had a little bit of an incident with Magnussen, in fact, on the very first day of practice. And Katayama there is the driver who is more renowned in Formula One for spinning, crashing than anybody else. Indeed, he's actually gone off the road 7 times this year. He has the worst accident record, including the most spectacular, sadly, as we'll recall from Portugal, of any driver in Formula One. But Schumacher dispenses with Katayama and now closes up on Magnussen ahead.
Now, I draw your attention to the fact that Jan Magnussen is not only just behind Mark Blundell, but on the same lap. They're in 10th and 11th places. And I don't know if Mark Blundell has got a problem or whether Jan Magnussen is just driving absolutely brilliantly. But whatever, the two McLarens are together. It's Blundell's 58th Grand Prix. It's Magnussen's first. There he is, just driving out of the picture. And here is Michael Schumacher. He's on lap 74 now. He's got less than 10 laps to go. Flavio Briatore, the boss of the Benetton team, looks pretty relaxed and happy, as well he might be, because his 2 cars are 1st and 6th, both in the points, and they're pulling away from Williams in the Constructors' Championship, with Michael Schumacher almost with his hand on his 2nd World Championship in 2 years.
We see from the graphic 8.4 seconds there. Coulthard now behind Schumacher. The gap was considerably larger than that, but let's not forget that Schumacher is the one that's been held up because of this traffic, and that in turn will afflict Coulthard in probably another 3 laps time, when the gap will then expand again.
Yes, I think that'll give David a bit of some spirit. He's going to have to get past those back markers too, as you rightly say. But Schumacher's coming up behind the 2 McLarens, and Magnussen's going to want to be pushing Blundell as hard as he can for his own reputation, as Eddie Irvine looks as if he's dropping out of the Grand Prix, and Blundell's sure as hell not going to want to let him pass, so that could be difficult for Schumacher.
Is this going to be? Yes, yet again both Jordans are going to be out of the race. Barrichello has retired 7 times this year. Eddie Irvine has retired 7 times before this race, so it's going to be 8 times for both drivers. It looks to me as though he's got a right rear puncture.
Yes, he has indeed got a right rear puncture, and he's going to be nursing that back to the pits. Martin, this was something which afflicted you back in Monza, if I recall correctly, and in that case you didn't manage to get back to the pits without too much damage being done.
Yeah, but Eddie's tyre's only flat at the bottom. Mine came off the rim altogether.
Yours was flat at the top as well, Martin. So lap 75 into the pits. No laughing matter for poor Eddie Irvine, who I remind you goes to Ferrari next year.
Yes, Murray, you're obviously more technical than we thought, as Eddie Irvine comes in for a new right rear on that Jordan. That's going to put him back behind back behind Magnussen and Mark Blundell.
You'll notice, incidentally, that he comes into the pits. He's got the high forward mid-wing. Same sort of idea as McLaren pioneered, to a lot of derision from a lot of people on account of its ugly appearance. But Gary Anderson and the aerodynamicists in the Jordan team obviously think the idea is worthwhile. Eddie Jordan used it in this race. Rubens Barrichello did not. He had a different rear wing to try to give him the same effect. We're on lap 76 now with Michael Schumacher between the 2 McLarens, the 2 battling McLarens. He's passed Magnussen, and it looks to me as though David Coulthard is making a super advantage of the traffic, and he's closer, I do believe, visually anyway, to Michael Schumacher than he was the last time I saw them close together. Now this is lap 76. The gap at the end of the previous lap was 8.4 seconds. The time on the previous lap was much the same between the 2 of them. Coulthard is certainly on 6 points at the present moment. Schumacher is on 10. Damon Hill is still 3rd, but just not in the running at all. And Schumacher is being held up. Now there's Blundell ahead of him. They pass Lamy and look back down the track as we do, and that is David Coulthard. The gap has been reduced from just over 8 seconds to just under 8 seconds. But that is, of course, because Michael Schumacher is in amongst traffic that David Coulthard is not, and that David Coulthard will himself be striking. So unless Coulthard has more success in getting through the traffic than the utterly ruthless and determined Michael Schumacher does, he's famous for his ability to carve through traffic, the gap will be returned to what it was before when Coulthard hits that traffic. And that won't be too long now. 6.9 seconds. This is lap 77. Coulthard really going for it. He's fighting right to the end of this race. Now there is Schumacher. He's got ahead of both McLarens. Meantime, Magnussen has closed up on Mark Blundell, who is in 9th position. This is a magnificent Grand Prix debut for Jan Magnussen, who has been driving for Mercedes-Benz in the touring car Class 1 category this season, the DTM and the ITC series, and he finished second. And now the gap was 7.9 seconds on the previous lap. Schumacher is through. Coulthard goes across the line in second place, still a long way ahead of his teammate Damon Hill. Into the right-hander at first corner, and we wait for Hill to come through in third position. Well, there's no doubt about the fact that Coulthard is closing up on Michael Schumacher, who's now got a clearish track ahead of him, but I don't think that in the 6 laps to the left, including the one they're on, Coulthard is going to be able to get to grips. I'm sure he's not with Michael Schumacher, because remember, there's the Blundell-Magnussen battle behind Michael Schumacher that Coulthard has got to catch and get past. That is the world champion, the first ever world champion for Germany in Formula 1 Grand Prix racing, Michael Schumacher, who did so well last year in very difficult circumstances, some of which were not entirely his fault, and who has done brilliantly this year. It looks like his 8th Grand Prix win of 1995 coming up, and are not very happy, I'm sure, Frank Williams, as Ross Brawn, the top designer and chief technician of the Benetton team, looks happily at Michael Schumacher going through. He's on his 79th lap now. Martin?
I think Frank's a bit sad that Benetton are taking, if the cars finish in these positions now, Benetton will take one further point from Williams in the Constructors' World Championship, which is much more important to those constructors than they'd have you believe.
Yes, and the sad thing is that David Coulthard will be leaving the Williams team this year to go to McLaren, not of his own volition. For whatever reason, Williams decided that they would dispense with his services in favour of the brilliant young Jacques Villeneuve, the Canadian, who has yet to drive in a Grand Prix, and they did that as David Coulthard really got to the top of what we have seen is his brilliant form. And I know Coulthard doesn't want to leave, so it really is a great pity.
Yes, it certainly seemed strangely coincidental that at the Hungarian Grand Prix, which was the race in which Damon Hill's position with the team was secured for 1996 for rumoured $7 million, that's around about £4 million. It was following that race that David Coulthard has really out-qualified Damon Hill every time, and indeed since then David Coulthard's also out-raced Damon too. But the fact remains that McLaren did have an option on David Coulthard's services anyway for 1996, therefore it wasn't really Williams simply pushing Coulthard out. Williams knew that McLaren had this option, and they did not wish to progress the situation and try and buy off this option until McLaren had either taken it up or not. And it did seem, one has to say, that at the time that Williams made the decision to take Damon Hill there, and we're looking at him, that really his performances were much better than those of David Coulthard, who in the first part of the season had been disappointing. Now it looks in retrospect as if pure lack of experience, but also maybe this malingering tonsillitis that he had that was ultimately resolved with a tonsillectomy really may have been a factor there, because there's no doubt Coulthard really has driven superbly the last few Grand Prix.
And we need not to be looking at this Benetton, but the other Benetton now. Understandably, the producer is watching Michael Schumacher on his 80th lap out of 83, but his teammate Johnny Herbert is on a superb charge in the second Benetton. He is now only 9/10 of a second behind Jean Alesi's Ferrari. The race order on lap 80 out of 83, lap 81 now out of 83. Schumacher that you're looking at leads Coulthard with the race in his pocket, barring a mechanical problem. He's 11 seconds ahead of the Williams Renault. Coulthard is 35 seconds ahead of Hill, who is third, who is 44 seconds ahead of Berger, who is fourth, who is 8 seconds ahead of Alesi, who is fifth, who is less than a second, 7/10 of a second, ahead of Johnny Herbert. So, if the producer can hear me, and he can't, it would be nice to be able to see the battle between Jean Alesi and Johnny Herbert.
So Michael Schumacher now close to taking his 8th win and, of course, the World Championship. And it's been another superbly professional effort, both from Schumacher and the Benetton team. Throughout practice, he was not so concerned about qualifying, but he pounded around on old tyres, perfecting the setup of that Benetton car. At the start, from third position, he got held, he got bogged down a bit. Hill pushed him wide, quite legitimately. Schumacher down in 4th place, but he fought back. Benetton team made great use of the pit stops to leapfrog Schumacher ahead of both Hill and Alesi, who he was following in the early stages, and that was the turning point of the race. Schumacher went off then on his 3-stop strategy and has driven superbly. Behind in 2nd place now, David Coulthard, 11 seconds behind Schumacher, did so much right. Pole position, got away off the lead as he's done every time too from pole position, and really did nothing wrong at all. And I think the biggest problem for David Coulthard has been the 2-stop strategy that the Williams employed, and he is now just 12 seconds behind, and we knew that from the theory 2 stops was 15 seconds slower than 3 stops, so just maybe that really has made the difference, whilst it has been no doubt a disappointing race for Damon Hill. He made a good start but lost out to Alesi. Alesi was 4th on the grid, Hill 2nd, and that was to prove crucial because Hill got held up behind Alesi for the whole of the 1st and the 2nd stint, and Williams' pit work undoubtedly let Hill down, but then Hill did also make a minor error as it turned out. But nevertheless, I'm afraid the fact is that Michael Schumacher is very much the deserving world champion this year.
He's on his 82nd lap out of 83, but just to bring you into the picture, Johnny Herbert is now right under the rear wing of Alesi's Ferrari, or was as they passed the commentary box, and now Michael Schumacher enters the 83rd and last lap of the Pacific Grand Prix at Aida. He won in his inimitable style from the lights to the checkered flag last year. It hasn't been as easy a victory this year, but in many ways it has been even more meritorious because he's had to fight his way through the field. He's proved yet again that the strategy, the strategic thinking of his team in alliance with himself, his driving ability and the Renault V10 engine is making him the class of the field. He's just a few hundred yards away now from clinching his 2nd successive World Championship. He won in 1994. He's going to win again in 1995. Both the race and the championship. He's put Damon Hill away in the most convincing possible way, not by being content to drive round and get 3 points, but to fight for victory, as he supremely did in the Grand Prix of Europe last year. So Michael Schumacher enters the last corner of the last race of the last lap to win the Pacific Grand Prix in Japan and to become the world champion of 1995. The Benetton team, of course, are ecstatic. David Coulthard is going to take 2nd place, a worthy 2nd place. He's lost to, frankly, a better driver, a better combination of car and driver. He crosses the line in a worthy 2nd place, and now we wait roughly half a minute for a sadly, thoroughly vanquished Damon Hill, who entered this race 27 points behind Michael Schumacher and has lost the championship to him here.
I wonder if that's a very emotional Michael Schumacher inside that crash helmet. The fist hasn't come out of the cockpit at all, and that's very unusual for him.
I remember Jean Alesi saying that he literally cried. That's Damon Hill crossing the line to finish third for 4 points when he really needed 10, and he waves a hand of, I suppose, resignation and regret to the crowd, and Michael Schumacher now does wave a hand of victory, and Flavio Briatore is interviewed. And the Pacific Grand Prix, the second race that's been held at this privately owned circuit in excellent weather, has been won by Michael Schumacher from David Coulthard. Benetton beats Williams. Damon Hill loses the World Championship but takes third position. The two Ferraris of Gerhard Berger and Alesi finish fourth and fifth. And Johnny Herbert in the second Benetton takes sixth place and increases his team's lead in the Constructors' Championship over Williams.
And Benetton and Schumacher's performance really does give the lie to the notion that all you need to have in Formula One is the fastest car. And if you've got the fastest car, you're going to win Grand Prix and win the World Championship. The Benetton hasn't been the fastest car this year, I'm pretty sure of that. It's been the Williams car, and Schumacher has made the best possible use of it. He has been at least a second faster than his teammate Johnny Herbert most of the year, and that really is a remarkable advantage. But then the team too have made use of a car which they, by their own admission, know is not as good as it could have been. With this superb strategy, the tactics, they really do make the very best use of the package from every area: driver, setup, and strategy too. And I'm quite sure that next year, when of course they won't have Schumacher, they're going to have Berger and Alesi, who I think will probably benefit from the more disciplined approach that Benetton will provide them. I'm sure they will learn this year too from the Williams car, and I think they're going to be quite a threat next year too. While Schumacher, of course, will be very much that with Ferrari. The new V10 engine has been going very well in testing, but he is world champion. The team are ecstatic.
And so is Flavio Briatore. Well, he's done it. His 8th win. He won in Brazil, in Spain, in Monaco, in France, in Germany, in Belgium, at the Nürburgring, and now here in Japan.